But I do think that a lot of times,
Sorry, go on.
like God of the gaps, like, that like accusation, there's kind
It's
of
not an accusation.
well, I mean, yeah, or whatever word you want to
It's an
use, I guess.
observation.
Okay, that
Yeah.
observation. Uh, I think
And that's what
sometimes there's
words are important on these things.
I think there's like
Yeah.
sometimes an underlying assumption that, and it is true in many cases. So I can see why people get to this assumption, but the assumption I think is that like science is always closing these gaps, whereas uh, as I've looked into some of the things, I'm not an expert on anything, but
Oh, same.
it seems like some gaps are getting bigger, and it seems like the gap increasingly becomes more difficult to fill with natural explanations and easier to
Give me an
fill
example.
with, yeah. So I would say a lot of examples of like arguments from irreducible complexity I think are really interesting.
No, that's not an example. That's Give me an example where what you're talking about, where
Yeah,
the gaps have got bigger because of
yeah,
science.
yeah. I think that would be an example. I can give a specific example of like an irreducibly complex thing. Um, I think uh, one example that's like really interesting to me that like kind of breaks my brain
Keep it a
is,
little bit simple if you can.
yeah, I'll try. This is the
Okay.
reason I like it, because it is kind of simple,
Okay.
but it is
Occam's
the
razor.
it's the caterpillar and like basically the evolution of metamorphosis. So
Hmm.
essentially, to get evolution, you need very slight modifications of something over time, and each modification of this thing needs to actually function enough to allow the organism to reproduce, right? Because that's how it passes on the new function that it's gained by
Yes.
random mutation. So the interesting thing and the hard thing to wrap my brain around with metamorphosis is basically you would have had to have like a caterpillar like ancestor, right, on an earlier Earth. And at some point, it would have had to evolve an ability to wrap itself into a cocoon, melt its body down, reform like completely new structures of motion, like wings, a completely new reproductive system, a new digestive system to move from eating leaves to eating nectar. And to do this, it has to, melt its body down and recreate its body. But the question is, basically, it's things like this that seems like that whole process has to come into existence all at once,
No,
or
you said it yourself. Over little
right,
more mutations over a very long, incomprehensible time.
right, right. But that's the complicated thing with like the caterpillar is one example, is it doesn't seem like there's a pathway for that to happen with slight modifications, because like, for example, if the first caterpillar, mutates enough, which would take many, many mutations just to
I've got to stop
gain
you
the
there. I've got
ability.
to. What if the
Well, let me
first
just finish this
caterpillar
thought. Like, it
was
would
the
take
one that
many
mutates?
mutations just to
Can
gain the ability to wrap yourself in a cocoon and, melt your
no,
body
no.
down. And at that point, you're not surviving to pass on your genes. So
What if the first caterpillar could do that?
do what?
Metamorphosis.
And turn into a butterfly?
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, you're saying that, like, I mean, it has to come from somewhere in evolution. Like,
Yeah. From like we're talking way back to single cell organisms in the sea. Blah blah blah.
right.
Um. I don't. I'm kind of losing you. We're both agreeing that over a long period of time that we're unable to comprehend, probably, really.
Right. So look,
Little mutations happen. So it's like a tree, isn't it? The branches
right.
come up. It's not. A lot of the time, religious people say, "Oh, a man gave birth to a monkey, so why is there still no? A monkey gave birth to a man. Why is there still monkeys?" It's not like that. They carry on. As a tree has a new branch, slight mutation, and then if it survives and it works better, it carries on. But some of the others carry on as well. They stem off of it. They don't
Right.
make
And
them
that's an
extinct.
overarching explanation, but I'm drilling down into one organism. And I think evolution makes sense when you look at a big picture view like that, But to me, when you start drilling down into an organism like the caterpillar, or almost like any organism really, it is much harder to see how these things can come about by random mutation. And I think that's why it's difficult. Like,
So, all right, let's even if I agree with you, which I don't, I think maybe there's some missing links. But if
yeah,
there was 95% of evolution we can see, and you find 5% we can't, I'm going to go with the 95%. Okay, and I'll say I don't know. There's some missing gaps. I'm happy with that. But
right.
the other point is, let's say I agree with you, and evolution didn't happen. It was creationism. Does that mean therefore God, or does it mean an infinite number of possibilities?
I mean, there could potentially be an infinite number of possibilities, but let's
Not
say,
potentially, there just is.
well, you do narrow down some possibilities. Like, I mean, if it were true that an organism was irreducibly complex, that it could
No,
not
no,
be
no.
made.
Creationism. I'm agreeing with you. It's creationism.
Uh,
Therefore, God created it, or anything, infinite number of things could have created it.
yeah, it could have been, basically, it would have had to have been
I mean, the world,
something
everything, the
very
universe,
intelligent, I would say, and probably like
the
with a
whole
mind
universe
to choose to
was
do it, right?
created. Let's say I take your position on creationism. Are you a creationist?
Yes.
I take your position. I fully agree. I don't, but let's say I do.
Yeah.
Who created it?
Right. So if like I could absolutely prove creationism, which, like, this hypothetical, I've proved
No,
it.
no. Who? The question was who created it?
Yeah.
Infinite number of possibilities. Who created the universe? You're going to say I don't know. Therefore, God.
No, I wouldn't say I don't know, therefore God. Like, if the only argument that I had was like creationism is true, like, basically if I could prove that evolution, was not capable of making life, and that a mind of some kind had to be
And I can
involved.
fully agree with that if you want. Where
Yeah,
do we
so
go from there?
if I did that, then I all I could get to would be something very intelligent, probably personal, probably with some means, so like some type of technology or power to do something, created this stuff. Now that would
So
leave a
why not? There's
lot
no
of
other possibility
possibilities.
then. There's
Yeah.
no other possibility. Is it
Wait,
evolution
wait, wait,
or
wait, wait.
intelligence?
I wanna throw a caveat on
I
that.
mean, yeah, I think it would
So,
have to have intelligence. Like,
so,
what other
so let's.
possibility would there be besides evolution and
Infinite.
intelligence?
Okay, okay. So
Like,
let's.
what? Can
No,
you
no, no,
give one
no.
more?
Let's go with the creation
We can't just say
thing
there's infinite
with
possibilities and
Let Jay
not name
speak
one.
first.
Okay.
Can you
okay,
hear Jay or not?
yeah, man. Let me get a few words in. All right, then you can go back. So let's go with that position and say create. Boom, God. All right. Let's throw evolution out the door. Now you have another dilemma, in my opinion, because now which God?
Right.
Yeah.
You see
Right.
what I'm saying? So it gets even more sticky. Because now you come with a Christian, correct? So and they have their own story about things being created in Genesis and things like that. But now you have all these other religions that could possibly be true as well.
Right. Well, I
And
mean, I don't really.
and the percentage. No, I'm just saying, like, how would you attack that if we come to the conclusion evolution is, we know there's a creator, some creation. Now we're having a different conversation of what religious text or God do we believe in now, because there's hundreds of them and you believe in one, which means the percentage of you being correct is very low. Is 1% or even below 1%, if you compare it against all the other
Right.
religions.
But that
So
would
how
I
be
would you
working
need
how
to
would
off
add
of
to
the
that.
assumption that they
how would you
all have
attack
a.
that?
Hold
I
on.
think.
Can I add to it before you answer?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to go back to my infinite possibilities. Okay, you're talking about the gods that we've made up in my mind,
Correct.
or the gods that are written about. There's an infinite number we could add to that.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of
So
all,
So my
I would
there's an
question to
say,
infinite
Colin
number of
is how would
possibilities.
he yeah, my question to him is how would he attack that? That's what I want to know.
How
yeah.
would he prove it's his god?
First of all, let me answer it in two parts. In
Evidence.
the second part, I'll really answer it. But first, I would say, I mean, for right now, this is a conversation with me, like, a believer in some kind of God and the
Of course,
supernatural,
yeah. You're coming
and
from a
and,
position.
and two atheists, right? So, like, I think
Yeah,
I didn't
it,
say
it
I
would
was
still
I
be
didn't say I
very
was atheist.
interesting
it
Go
if
is.
ahead.
if we all collectively figured out that there must be a God of some kind. That would be a big step forward, and we could all collectively then be like, all right, which God is it? So I just
But we're
think
not
that
there. We're
has to be
nowhere near
pointed
there.
out. And then to answer your
Hypothetically, yeah.
question like more directly, I mean, I think one assumption in your question is that it is equally likely to be every god. Like every god has an equal likelihood of being the god of the universe, or of life, or whatever it may be. And I just don't think that's true. I think some can be disqualified, basically.
Which ones
How? Yeah, which ones?
Well, I mean, when I look at,
and why?
for one, I mean,
Oh, sorry, I've got
if
to
you,
go to little boy's room. You're is
yeah,
that
no
all right,
problem.
guys? I
No,
don't
it's
want to
fine.
wet myself in front of you.
uh, yeah, I mean, I would say if you're looking at the organized religions, then I would just say Christianity has the best evidence out of the organized religions. Um, if you're, I mean, and you could add things like a deist god, like you could say, well, maybe none of the religions are true, and it's like just a like god who's uh, something completely different than what anybody's worshipped really, or maybe he doesn't want to be known and he hasn't let himself be known. So you could ask those type of things. So you would have to get into other arguments basically. But as far as this argument from like,
So does the religion have to be organized for it to be considered valid or considered
no,
true?
no, like it could be true that God is, like not the God of any organized religion, but you can't get to like the point where you can decide between gods or decide that none of the gods are true. It's a different God. You can't get to that point on creationism alone, right? You have to start looking into religions. You have to start looking into other types of things.
Sure.
Yeah. So what do you think about like? Because I mean, he didn't really give like an answer to the
So what?
example of the caterpillar and irreducible complexity. What do you think about that?
I
Were
think
you
more than
understanding
likely,
like kind of what I was
yeah,
saying
yeah,
there?
I understood everything you guys were saying, and my personal opinion is, more than likely, the caterpillar was, when it first came, that it was already able to do that. That
Yeah, see, I
makes the
just
most
don't even
sense.
see how that would be possible because, like, if you follow like the tree of life, like, let's try and have a hypothetical tree of life. You have a single-celled organism, right? And you have some
Hmm.
multi-cell organisms. Then you get your fish, then you get some things crawling on land. Eventually, like, you are going to have a something that's like a worm of some sort before you get a caterpillar. Like that just has to be the case evolutionarily because things have slight modifications, right? That's the whole theory of
Well,
evolution is
according
that
to
things
evolution,
evolve,
yeah, according to evolution, sure.
right? So you would have to start out with some type of worm-like caterpillar ancestor that
Hey, stop!
could
Look,
not
look what he's
develop
talking
flight.
about here. Evolution.
Um, I mean, don't you think that's true? Like you couldn't just spontaneously
Well,
get
according to
a worm that could do
evolution,
metamorphosis and turn into a butterfly. That's like so many
I,
mutations all at once going completely right.
He's gone back to that.
Yeah, I was just asking him
no,
what he thought.
he was just asking me my personal opinion, and I
Yeah.
personally I just think the caterpillar was always able to do that when it first came.
So you think at
But
some point there was like no like, worm like caterpillar ancestor and then, at the next moment or shortly after there was a worm like
I'm gonna
thing
close
that
this
could
one
have
down. Heck, is it
metamorphosis and
Hex?
turn into a
I
flying
can't
thing.
remember. What's his name?
That just seems like
well,
I can't see your
kind
name
of
now. What's your name?
I mean, I don't.
anti-evolution.
His
Like
name
it's
is
not
Colin.
slight modifications. Sorry, what'd
Colin.
you say?
Well,